And you will see in most of these death cults, there is a charismatic leader who somehow the rules don't apply to them, so they can have sex with everybody and procreate and then create some kind of little island of madness. And then these people follow. You don't have to have anybody outside of yourself, not a supernatural entity, not another human being, nothing, not an organization, nothing outside yourself for your own salvation. Welcome, everyone, and Happy New Year 2025. That's the future. It's crazy. My name is Ann Kelly, and with me, as always, is the one and only esoteric author, Tim Wyatt. He's more than just an author, though. Tim, Happy New Year, sweetheart. How was your New Year's?
Well, it's a wonderful new year. It's always a great time of the year to just look forward ahead to what you're going to be doing. So I wish you a very happy new year and all the viewers and listeners as well.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I'm hoping, I would have to say, personally, 2024 was annus horribilis for us. So I'm looking forward to another cycle completing and the opportunities that come from difficulties. So I'm looking forward to a much more positive year for us and for everyone listening and watching. Happy 2025. I want to let you know that Tim has a brand new Substack. I know we talked about it last week on Christmas, but listen, if you haven't done this, make this your New Year's resolution to subscribe on Substack to Tim on the esoteric perspective. All right. It goes hand in hand with that death show. If you love the stuff here, you're going to love the Substack. And I tell you what, Tim can crank out material like no other. Tim, can you give them just a little preview of what they're going to be getting on the esoteric perspective, please?
Well, I've been writing esoteric material for around about 15 years now, and there's a lot of it. And this has provided an opportunity to gather it together from all sorts of different sources and put it together. These involve lectures that I've given. They involve articles I've written for numerous different magazines and online sites and various other things. And there'll also be 3 of my novellas. These are very short novels which can be read in just over an hour. And there will be 3 of those on offer as well.
So remember, it is called The Esoteric Perspective. We will have links for you here in that death show. And we want to thank you all for being here and being a part of this. This is new. We just launched at the end of October. And every week, Tim and I suit up and we show up here to take you on a journey beyond the veil of death. We try to offer comfort and hope by sharing these ageless teachings to uncover the profound purpose of our existence. Death is not fatal. It's not final. It's not permanent. And our true selves, we are immortal energy, and physical death is going to come, but it's just a doorway to a brand new beginning. So last week, we talked about proof of reincarnation. We just touched on it just a little bit, and the winter solstice. And today, since it is New Year's Day, we're going to talk about death cults. Death cults in religion, in politics, the Nazis. I would love to cover that because we have a lot of misconceptions with the theosophical teachings and being associated with Nazi. They have nothing to do with each other. We're going to talk about that, and Jim Jones and all of that. So why not? Quick break, though, really quick. If you're here, please help us. It's just Tim and I. If you're digging the show, do me a favor and just go down below and click, and Tim a favor too, and click the subscribe button. Just do it now. We're going to wait. Okay. Did you do it? Perfect. Okay, just click that. And if you can, like, subscribe, share, rate on the other platforms. We have a bigger swath of people coming in through Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please could you rate and review? We would appreciate it. We're on Spotify too, all the major podcast platforms. Thank you so much. So, Tim, I have a couple questions from listeners before we get too far in really quick. This is John. He asks, if I'm laid to rest in a proper burial, or if I'm left in a ditch, does it make a difference to my etheric being?
Absolutely no difference whatsoever. The same process will emerge whether you're in a funeral home, on a battlefield, in a car crash, wherever. It doesn't matter how and where you die. The process is exactly the same. The physical body dies, the etheric energetic body dies shortly afterwards, and you wind up on the astral plane. So it's the same for everybody. Of course, if you die in a state of absolute terror, or you die wanting to cling to life for whatever reason, then this may affect your onward journey. But otherwise, no, the process is exactly the same.
The ceremony is for those who are still in the physical world, which it is going to be difficult for them to say goodbye until the next lifetime. There is a huge loss there. But the funerals, whatever ceremony that is for those who remain. For you, I believe what Tim is saying there, it makes no difference at all. But he also has another question here, Tim. He says, is there any more karma experienced after the spirit leaves the body? What does esoteric science say?
Well, karma can only apply in a physical way on the physical plane. So when you are between lives, you're not particularly building up any karma there, nor are you discharging any. These are neutral times. The purpose of the astral plane is actually to deal with some aspects of our emotional selves. The astral plane is a kind of a refinery or purification center where the more brutal and coarse aspects of our astral bodies are refined and the best things extracted from it. But that's not karma as such. That's dealing with the result of karma. And those souls who go onto the higher worlds, the mental plane, the heaven world, there's certainly no discharging of karma there, because this is a place of perfection and a place of bliss where we don't have to worry about anything other than constructing a new life at some point.
So it is a period of rest. You do get to rest, but I think, Tim, we carry karma from previous incarnations. So it kind of goes on pause, and then you play it out and you pay it out when you're born again into another physical body. Isn't that correct?
Well, it happens to you. You deal with this karma at a time and in an existence when you can deal with it, because it's not there to kill you. It's not there to damage you. It may be that we have karma unfolding in our lives now, which wasn't a result of our last life, or even the one before that. It might have been 2 or 3 lives back, and there is something that still needs to be resolved in this life. Of course, we have no knowledge of this, or most people below initiate status have little or no knowledge of these things.
And really quick, we did touch on this in a previous episode. You will see some people who seem to have a completely, well, almost completely, really calm life. And those are periods of rest. There are incarnations that we've talked about where you get a chance to have a holiday incarnation, and you don't have to pay back gnarly karma every single time, because you're eternal beings. You are eternal energy. And though this earth may be heavenly, in some places there is much suffering. There's much selfishness and greed and cruelty. And today, I'm very passionate about this, is this corruption. Tim, death cults, okay? That's what we say is our subject. What would define a death cult as opposed to a regular cult?
A death cult is one that enshrines death, either killing other people or killing oneself, as a central part of that body, that organization, that sect. Of course, they come in many different forms, and the most notorious death cult that we are familiar with, and we see relics of it on the television all the time, is Nazism. The Nazis were only in power for a little over 12 years. The Nazi Party itself only existed for a quarter of a century, but they managed to do more horrible, deadly things in that short time span than virtually any other empire that we are aware of. 60 million people died in the Second World War. The Nazis killed 6 million Jews alone, and they completely reshaped the world in that short period of time. But they weren't so much a political force or a political party. They were a death cult. Death was central to everything about Nazism, even down to the uniforms of the SS, who had a death's head skull on their caps and everything. So it was absolutely central to this. And Hitler, from his bunkers poring over his map tables, was quite happy to consign another 50,000 men to their deaths, or 100,000 men, because he didn't want them to retreat at all. So you have to say that death was absolutely central to Nazism. But then communism was no better either, because Joseph Stalin, during his years of terror, he killed many millions of his own citizens. Obviously, 20 million Russians died in the Second World War alone. But Stalin, certainly with his gulags and his prison camps and everything, and his starvation of different sections of the population, you have to say that that was almost a death cult as well.
Why do we do this? How do we think that by eliminating others what do we gain from that? Is it just greed and power? Is it ignorance? Why do we do this? Why? What is the fundamental human reason why we would do this? Why do we keep doing it?
Well, in the case of Germany, if we look at it outwardly, we can see that the Great Depression came. Hitler promised Germans that they would have prosperity again. They would regain their national pride after the humiliation of the First World War. But looking at it esoterically, it's almost as if a destructive archetype, a warrior archetype, descends on the German people. The German people were very civilized, very educated, probably the best in the world. Their science was second to none. And yet the people could be enslaved by this idea. I'm not saying every single German subscribed to Nazism, because they certainly didn't. But large enough swathes of that population did to make it the powerful and destructive force it became.
I know. You can see I want to say brainwashing being swept up in this movement. I just am absolutely blown away. And I get really angry when I see how we treat each other based on religion or politics. What right do we have to treat each other that way? Because we are each other. And there's a quote here that's attributed to Kutumi really quick. It's just really, my blood always boils when we talk about stuff like this. But in the Mahatma Letters number 10, Kutumi is saying, he goes, "I will point out the chief cause of nearly 2/3 of the evils that pursue humanity ever since that cause became a power. It is religion, under whatever form and in whatsoever nation." And then he goes on to talk about the priests and the sacerdotal caste. And it's just why, obviously, the Jews being eliminated because of religious beliefs. We've been doing this since the beginning of time. I just get really, really, really angry. I don't understand why we still continue to act that way. What are the characteristics of these? What is the end goal? To kill everybody else that isn't you, I guess, and then sit at the top of the world and be king of the world? What is the goal?
Well, in the case of the Nazis, it was racial supremacy. In the case of the communists, it was a political ideology. Today, we see it embedded still in religions when we look at the activities of groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, Boko Haram, and various other Islamic terror groups. But we've also seen it deeply embedded in Christianity. Christianity has a very long and bloody past, and we can go through some of that if you want.
Oh my God. I honestly do get so upset about that. That's one of the things about these teachings, these ageless teachings that belong to all. The work is done on you, by you. You are the temple. That is all you need. Nature is the church. You do not, it's the churchianity and the, even just seeing what we've done to one another. How though, what I do wonder sometimes, just this is how my thoughts work. How do we have the right to say what another human's heart can feel or worship, as long as it's not hurting anybody? Why do we feel, though, still? Are we that young still? Are we that immature that we think we have the right to say what you believe? You can believe whatever you want to, as long as it's not hurting anybody. What difference does it make to me? Why do we still do that?
Well, we still do it because we've always done it. And we've always in the past seen that there has been some kind of central religious authority. Even, in tribes and clans, there is a chief of that clan, and there is a medicine man or a shaman or something like that. And so we have always wanted to bow down to some religious authority, because it's always been ingrained in us that we can't contact the divine direct. We have to have an intermediary, a witch doctor, a priest, an imam, someone who acts as the go-between. Certain of the Christian sects, the Gnostics, believed in direct contact with God, not requiring any ecclesiastical authorities or anything like that. And they were persecuted for that, of course, just the way the Catholic Church has persecuted all its distant sects after it established itself. By the year 1099, the first of 6 crusades was underway because Christianity couldn't live side by side with Islam, and so it had to eradicate it. And those crusades continued for a couple of hundred years. And then after that, Christianity turned its attentions to its own members. And for example, it massacred the Cathars, a well-known Gnostic sect, in the Albigensian Crusade of 1226, I think it was. But these were just the precursors of something even worse, if that's possible, the various inquisitions which swept across Europe in Spain and England and Italy and France. And these were hugely influential over people's minds, because at that point, the mindset was that the devil was everywhere and the devil had to be conquered along with his legions. And so thousands of people were tortured and executed for all sorts of spurious reasons. There were all the witch-burning trials in England and in North America in the early years of that colony. And of course, one of the interesting things about the Inquisition is that it never actually went away. It still exists. In 2022, Vatican renamed it. Let me find out the proper name here. The Dicastery of the Faith, which sounds very innocent and everything. I don't think they use the thumb screws and burn people too much anymore, but nevertheless, it's still there in order to enforce conformity.
I get so angry. I'm so sorry. I literally can feel my blood boiling. I normally don't get that angry. But the Cathars, I mean, all of that, they were good men and they worked in harmony with nature. They were loving and they were compassionate. A majority of the people who go to church, who want to try to do good, and they just want to be the higher self, which is patience, kindness, empathy, love, unconditional love, unity. And look what we do. We murder, we torture. We're sadistic, sick bastards about trying to shove our religions down other people's throats. We have no right. And that's one of the reasons that the perennial philosophy, theosophy, if you want to call it that, you can call it anything. When you take the responsibility, you don't need a priest. You don't need a leader. You don't need an initiation. You don't need to have to pay money to have this happen. This is work done on yourself. The instructions are available to all. There are links down below, or you can find them yourself. I just feel sometimes I'm like, what am I even doing here on this planet? This is completely ridiculous. We are still ignorance, greed, selfishness, and it's still happening now, especially with the Christians watching. I mean, I know that they get picked on a lot because I was Catholic. I grew up Catholic. So my perspective, that's where I'm coming from when I speak like this, is it's not okay what we're doing. It's not okay. But I do have hope that more people are opening their eyes. Do you think that we're at least evolving somewhat? Are we going to do another 700 years of this crap? What do you think?
I think established religions have got a long way to run yet, even though they're starting to unravel. Certainly Christianity in the West, in America, it's still very strong. Islam is still a growing religion. So we are stuck with these things, I think, for a long time. But these things become very, very perverted, especially when people turn them into small sects. For example, one of the most famous ones over the last few years was the Reverend James Jones, who led a kind of communist-inspired Christian cult called the People's Temple. And he set up his own community in Guyana after being run out of the United States. And in 1978, he organized a mass suicide of more than 900 of his followers. He gave them fruit juice laced with cyanide, not a cocktail I'd particularly like to imbibe. And he described this as revolutionary suicide. There were other groups. When we had a comet back in the late 1990s, there were groups of people then who actually committed suicide because they thought the world was going to end. And these end of the world cults have been many of them down the years, and people have often engaged in forms of mass suicide then as well. In 1984, there was a group called the Order of the Solar Temple in Switzerland. And about 48 or 49 of their members suddenly committed suicide in some underground chapel in Switzerland. So you ask yourself, how can people get seduced into this kind of nonsense? But they do. People are extremely vulnerable to even the most ridiculous suggestions. So why does this keep happening? Because people keep on behaving like sheep and can't think for themselves. And this is a prerequisite for spiritual advancement. Think for yourself.
Yes, please think for yourself. It is all about you and what you do. At Jonestown, those were mostly children that were killed. Why? It's because he kept going further and further and further out so he could have this power. And you will see in most of these death cults, there is a charismatic leader who somehow the rules don't apply to them, so they can have sex with everybody and procreate and then create some kind of little island of madness. And then these people follow. You don't have to have anybody outside of yourself, not a supernatural entity, not another human being, nothing, not an organization, nothing outside yourself for your own salvation. So I was not expecting this to be so passionate, so huge. But this is happening because, as you say, we are sheep. We are following and looking for it outside of ourselves. In the perennial philosophy, it very clearly states that it takes place inside of you. And Tim touched on this in the last episode and a little bit in this episode, that what you do in here is how you change the world. You change yourself, you overcome yourself, you work on yourself, and you then change the world. It's true. Your thoughts, change your thoughts. You will see a reflection of that in your world, which affects others. So I was going to ask, it's just so fiery. Why then is it, I don't know, like this fetish to talk about the world is going to end? The earth is going to be fine if we don't destroy ourselves, whatever. We might be able to enjoy it. We don't have the power to destroy the earth. We have the power to destroy ourselves. What is this weird, sick, almost sexual fetish with the end of the world, the apocalypse, which doesn't mean that, actually?
People believe that prostitution is the world's oldest profession. It isn't. Predicting the end of the world is the world's oldest profession. And, this is something that is woven its way through history. There have been people in every country, every culture, every religion who've suddenly woken up one morning and decided that the end of the world is nigh. When I was a small boy growing up in the city of Bradford, there would be men who would walk around saying, the end of the world is nigh, on a little sandwich board around their necks and everything. And these people absolutely believe this stuff. And you wonder why. And I have no explanation for why people join these cults or why people have these millennial apocalyptic feelings. Now, the apocalypse you mentioned, this is a word taken straight out of the book of Revelation, the weirdest and possibly most interesting book of the Bible, certainly the New Testament. And this idea of the apocalypse is something that's just taken from that. And it's been Hollywoodized over the years in popular consciousness. And this is why some people take it on board as an actual thing. Oh, yes, the apocalypse is just round the corner. And it's not difficult, particularly in these difficult and febrile times that we find ourselves in, for people to latch onto these things for some kind of weird, gratuitous comfort of some kind.
Absolutely. And the etymology of the word apocalypse simply means, as you hear, revelations. It means to reveal, to unveil, to look beyond or uncover. That's all it means. The apocalypse is not synonymous with the end of the world. We've made it that way, just like the word occult isn't synonymous with the black arts. It's part of that, because it just means occult means the hidden or the not seen. And the word apocalypse, if you don't believe me, look it up. It simply means to unveil. It's going to show you the truth. So God help us. There's so much symbology and analogy and parables written in these sacred texts, but we take them literally and we act like just idiots. And really quick, I wanted to mention too, I wanted to make sure I cover this. This channel used to be called, this YouTube channel, if you're watching on YouTube, it used to be called Living Theosophy. That name now is with Pablo and Michelle Sender. They're going to do wonderful things with it. But the name Theosophy, so I'd have to say 20% of the comments I'll get will say, oh my God, that's a Nazi cult, because you will see the swastika, which is an ancient symbol. Tim, and I'd like for you to take that away. The swastika did not originate with the Nazis. They hijacked that, as well as the word Aryan and the White Brotherhood and all that. Can you explain a little bit about that?
The swastika, in one of its many forms, and it comes in a number of different forms, is one of the oldest symbols known to man. Near where I live here, there are many stone carvings on the moors going back between 5,000 and 7,000 years. And one of them is called the swastika stone, and it shows it's actually a three-pointed thing, but it's nevertheless called the swastika. Of course, the swastika appearing as it does on the TS emblem, it tends to be softened now because of sensitivities. The swastika, or the filfot, has now become so degraded as a symbol, it will be impossible to use it at any time for hundreds of years, I guess, because it is so tainted with what the Nazis did to it. Interestingly enough, it still features prominently in Hinduism. If you go to places where there are Hindus, you will see swastikas everywhere. The Finnish army only got rid of this as their emblem about 3 or 4 years ago. But certainly here in Britain and the West, it is a potent symbol of evil, which will never able to be revived. So theosophy has got absolutely nothing to do with that. It's one of the most ancient symbols that we incorporate. Another accusation that's leveled against theosophy is the idea that Madame Blavatsky was somehow one of the perpetrators and architects of Nazism, and nothing could be further from the truth, because she invented a society which was unique at the time in offering a brotherhood without consideration of sex, race, caste, or anything else. No discrimination whatsoever. The difficulty comes in her use of the word Aryan. And what she's using that word for is not to describe some sort of Teutonic Superman. It's to describe a development group of humanity, which is part of the current development phase of evolution. So people have seized on this word Aryan, and Aryan refers to people from India, from Europe. It is Aero-Indian languages. So it's got nothing whatsoever to do with that. And people who make these accusations should do their research and find out about these things before throwing these wild comments around, because they are simply absolutely inaccurate.
Yes, they are. And open your mind and do the research yourself. You have the internet at your fingertips. The word Aryan comes from Arya. It is Sanskrit, meaning noble or distinguished. And yes, they were hijacked by the Nazis. I did a video on that. I actually had the swastika, an old swastika, in the thumbnail, and I got a ban or something for that, just because immediately, without even investigating, they condemned it as the Nazis. It has nothing to do with theosophy. Oh, gosh, a passionate episode. Can you discuss the role, though, the charisma, or as they call it now, the Riz, the charisma of these cult leaders? From what I can see, even in the ones now, you'll see them in the New Age movements, people you really respect what you see coming out of their mouth or hear coming out of their mouth. And then you find out they're back there sexually assaulting people and blah, blah, blah. What is the role of having this primary person, and how can we protect ourselves and maybe recognize them better?
Well, we've had a whole load of these figures out. There have been quite a lot of them in India and also America and Europe, where they've made a great deal of money. They assume dictatorial control over their followers. They tell them to do one thing, and then they own 3 Rolls Royces and have sexual exploits with their followers. And this is far from unique. It seems almost as if people have a need for some guiding figure. However weird and strange these people are, people seem to want to latch onto them. Some of them are incredibly charismatic. Some of them are magnetic in their personalities, and some of them say things that people really like. But it's usually about power over people, and often it's just about material wealth. I remember there was a guy called the Guru Maharaji, and I think he had a number of Rolls Royces, because obviously I'd like a Rolls Royce for my spiritual development, but unfortunately the bank balance doesn't run to that. So I don't know what it is about these people. I think it is down to what we said before. People are very sheep-like. and they want to latch onto something. It's like people want to be part of a club, whether it's a football club or some other association. People want to mix with like-minded people. But also when you get these people coming along, and if they sound assured enough, people will think, oh, well, I don't have to think anymore. They have all the answers. I'm just going to go with them. And this is all too common.
Well, absolutely. And I think some of them might start out honest and sincere, and then they see the power and they see the adoration and they get the light. The light comes in and they're thinking, well, maybe there is only this one incarnation. I might as well live it to my best. And the lower self takes over. Greed, corruption, spiritual darkness in high places. But we are here on That Death Show to tell you, please, God, please listen, please. You don't need anybody else or anything else. The answers are within you. The teachings are out there. You can find them everywhere. And we are just grateful that you're here. What an exciting episode. I always get so excited about that. I mean, excited in a bad way. It really, really upsets me. Freedom from religion. I find the suffering. It is unnecessary. It is time we moved on. Nature is the church. You are the temple. Don't forget to check out Tim's most recent documentary, the inspiration for these podcasts. It's called The Myth of Death. It is the most comforting film. It's a short documentary, about 40 some minutes long, and it's free to watch on That Death Show's YouTube channel. It's also sweeping the film festivals across the globe. You can also check out his book, and you can find it. There's going to be, remember, the Substack, but you can find the actual book, Everyone's Book of the Dead, because the Tibetans have one, the Egyptians have one, and he's written one for you. It's at firewellbooks.co.uk. His brand new Substack is the esoteric perspective. Lost. Yes. And I will have links to that. That goes hand in hand with this podcast. And that is fleshed out every single day. And that's free. So you can get that, the esoteric perspective on Substack. We just got so much going on. Remember, it's just Tim and I here. It's just us digging the ditches and putting on the lights and all that. So please, if you can, please, it means so much to us that you are here. Please like, subscribe, comment, share, because together we can help get these ageless teachings out into the world where all can have access and more can realize that there is hope and comfort. And you are eternal beings, and you do not end at physical death. Any final thoughts, Tim? Last final thoughts on New Year's Day?
Well, only to repeat what I have said before, and that is people need to start thinking much more independently. And it's easier to do that now than it was in the past when religions had us by the throat. We don't need to do that anymore. Everything is available for us on the internet and in other places. But we have to put a bit of effort into this if we want to try and make any progress forward. So you have to be persistent. You have to actually put the effort in. No one can do this for you, least of all, a religion.
Thank you. Brilliant. Next week, join us for Death in Religion. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody. Death comes to us all, but death is not a tragedy. Everyone's Book of the Dead by Tim Wyatt reveals a whole new perspective on what lies beyond this earthly life. The Egyptians have a Book of the Dead. The Tibetans have a Book of the Dead. Shouldn't you have one too? This captivating, richly illustrated book explores the mystery of death by examining it from every angle, sharing the ageless esoteric teachings on karma, reincarnation, and after-death states, as well as examining death and dying in different cultures, religions, and spiritual traditions. Death is not fatal, final, or permanent, but simply a transitional doorway to a new beginning. Get your copy of Everyone's Book of the Dead today at firewheelbooks.co.uk.